This summer, we have been reading portions of the story of King David. We've read about how he killed the giant Goliath, how he became king, how he consolidated his control over the 12 tribes and joined the two kingdoms, how he established his capital in Jerusalem and brought the ark there. And now we skip ahead. There's a lot that we don't read about how he was fighting continuously with the different tribes around, the Philistines and others. A lot of his time was spent on the battlefield. But now he has a moment in today's lesson to reflect, to pause. He's sitting in his palace that he's built in Jerusalem, and he looks over and he sees that the Ark of the Covenant, the symbol of the presence of God, is in a tent. And he says to himself, how come I'm living in a palace and God is in a tent? That doesn't seem right. I'm going to build God a house, a temple. And he calls over the prophet. And again, it's a different prophet than we were reading about now. It's Nathan the prophet. And Nathan says, yes, David, that's great. Go for it. Very good cheerleader is Nathan the prophet. But then something happens. Nathan has a dream. He goes and he sleeps on it. And God communicates to him. And God often communicates to prophets in dreams. And in this dream, Nathan hears loud and clear God saying, whoa, I did not ask for a temple. Stop. Do not go. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Stop right where you are. I didn't ask for this. You're exceeding your mandate, David. I didn't ask you to build a house. In fact, you have mistaken this whole project. It's not about buildings. You know, in the clergy trade, we have a comment about people. There's something called the Oedipus complex. You've heard of the Oedipus complex, but the Oedipus complex is clergy who go from church to church and they feel like they've got to build something, otherwise they don't have anything to show. A lot of ministry is hard to quantify, right? It's not something that you can say, well, I accomplished this, and so there's this need to have a building or something. So I guess for me it's the new sidewalk. That's my legacy. But it's not about that, as what God is saying to David through Nathan. It's not about sidewalks. It's not about beautiful buildings, although we love our building. And thanks to the property committee for their excellent work in keeping up our building and doing all these things. But the actual temple that God is interested in is a temple you cannot build with stones and bricks. The temple that God is interested in is a spiritual temple not made with hands. And yes, David has a part to play in this. He is the ancestor from whom will proceed eventually the cornerstone, his descendant, Jesus the Christ. That is the cornerstone of the temple that God is building, a temple that is made up of people, that is made up of you and me. We are the living stones that are built into a spiritual temple with Christ as the cornerstone. But you know, David can't see that. All he can see is, I'm in a palace, God's in a tent, we got to fix this. He's a can-do kind of guy. Maybe you've known these people who have to be active. I imagine that David, when he was sitting down, had his foot tapping constantly, needed to get up and do something. You know, ready, fire, aim was the old joke, right? You don't think about it, you just do, just act. Maybe you're like that. Maybe you know someone like that. Maybe you're married to someone like that. It can be very difficult, right? Because the greatest things in our world are actually achieved by these people, and yet action without contemplation can get us in trouble. Sometimes our need to act has nothing to do with what we're actually called to do. There has to be a pause in there. I was reading an article looking up stuff from Psychology Today, and they talked about several steps that can help us to reflect on when it's right to act and when it's not. And I found these helpful, so I'll share, if I can remember, I'll share them with you. I read them at 8 o'clock, but they gave me grief for reading something. They said, you never read from a text. Don't do it. So, all right, I'm going to see if I can remember these. The first one is self-awareness, right? Why are we doing this action? Is it really about, like for David, is this really about God? Or is it really about David wanting to magnify his own glory. See what I've built for you, God? I've built you this glorious temple. Self-awareness and reflection can help us to sort out, what are we really hoping to achieve? Is this actually something worthy and good, or is this coming out of our anxiety or our ego or something else? Second is a pause. Sometimes it's good just to wait. Like Nathan is all for this until he sleeps on it. Sleeping on it gives him new perspective. It allows God to speak to him. It gives him a different perspective. Sometimes all we need to do to avoid mistakes is just to sleep on it. Wait 24 hours or a week. I learned this when someone was telling me about Amazon. You know, we can get everything instantly now. With Amazon, you can get stuff the same day now, apparently, or the next day, right? But there's a little trick. You see this sale, right, and it triggers you, and you got, there's only 2 left. You ever see that? This is this thing you want. There's only 2 left. Really? Really? Are there only 2 left, or is this a gimmick to push my button and get me to act quickly? Right? This is with airline seats too. Only 2 seats left. Better buy it right away, and I'm ready to click. But then I was told a strategy, which is put the item in your Amazon cart and leave it there for 24 hours or 48 hours or a week. Come back later, look at that item and see, do I still want it? You know, about half the time, I don't want it. A couple days later, it was about the anxiety of that moment. On reflection, no, I can live without that. What was I thinking? I don't know. I was caught up in the moment. So pause and reflect. So first, it's be aware of yourself, what pushes your buttons. Then second, pause, time out. The third is having an accountability partner, somebody who will challenge you and ask you good questions. For example, about a month ago, I got triggered by one of these online sales for an electric bicycle. Now, I love bicycling, and going up hills can be difficult, right? So an electric bike would be fantastic. And there's only, a few days till this sale is over. It's a great sale. You better buy it right this second. But I was fortunate, one of our parishioners, Mike Herdrick, was in my office. So I said, Mike, I'm going to buy this bike. And he was great. He said, hold on, why do you want to buy this bike? What about this bike appeals to you? I was like, well, what do you like to do? Why do you like to buy it? Well, for me, it's all about exercise and burning calories. He's like, well, you have a bicycle, right? And you can ride that and it burns calories? Yes. So how is this going to help you? I don't know. Turns out I was envious of my wife's electric bicycle. That was the real thing. But it took Mike asking me questions before I could come to that conclusion. So I didn't buy that bike yet. Then I think there's another piece of this too, which is we need to quiet our minds. A lot of these decisions are made through anxiety. Either we're carrying someone else's anxiety or we have our own anxiety, and so we want to have this quick fix. And the only way that we know of to calm our minds is prayer and meditation, right? Grounding ourselves in God, slowing down our minds, having a chance to reflect. That gives us the best chance to make decisions that are truly grounded in our sense of what is right and good and is part of God's plan for us. So those are some key things. Then I wanted to add another one when I was thinking about this, beyond the Psychology Today one. When I look at what St. Paul writes to the Ephesians about the spiritual temple being built up, one of the things that our faith allows us to do is to look beyond the immediate, right? David can only see what's right in front of him. I have a palace, God has a tent, I'm going to fix that because I'm a fixer. I'm going to do it, I got to act. His foot was tapping, I got to do something. But our faith helps us to step back and see that we are only one link in a chain that began with the beginning of creation and will end with the fulfillment of God's kingdom. We are not in charge of everything. I got to break it to you. We're not in charge of everything. We're barely in charge of ourselves. and yet we want to take upon ourselves too much, which is what David was doing. What we need to do is have the image, the perspective of what God is doing in the world, and then see ourselves as part of that, an integral part of that. Spiritual stones that are being built into this temple. But each of us is only one stone. We can't be the whole thing by ourselves. I don't know why we feel that we should be, but we can't be. And so knowing what our task is, really narrowing down, what am I here for? What can I do? I feel that in the political climate of today. Sometimes we feel like it's all up to us. The end of the world is coming. Oh, our job is the same today as it was yesterday, as it will be tomorrow, to bear witness to God's grace and love, however and wherever we are, to live lives that are loving, merciful, kind, that seek justice and mercy, right? That's our vocation, to do that, to be the best stone that we can be, knowing that we are part of a much grander whole. That gives us the ability, as the early Christians were able to do, to face terrible trials, even persecution, to see things falling apart, to see their own lives meaning nothing, right? What am I going to leave behind? It doesn't matter. You're part of God's wonderful, glorious, and abundant kingdom. It's not about you, right? It is about you because God loves you and has a purpose for you, but it's not all about you. That's what David needed to learn. And he was able to learn it thanks to the prophet Nathan, thanks to his own love of God. He was able to lay aside that ego and know that, hey, my job is to do what I can to my ability, what God has given me to do in this moment. I think that's so important for all of us to remember, to take the time to reflect on our own lives and our part of God's kingdom, to know that it's not all up to us, but that there are some things that we can do with all our might, no matter what the outcome is. Our call is to be faithful members of God's invisible and glorious temple, the kingdom of God that he is building with each of us as living stones into this glorious edifice. Whether or not we have a brand new sidewalk, God is still going to give us everything that we need to do what we have been called to do. And may we do it with a sense of peace and joy and above all, love.